What's up, guys? Welcome back to King Kraken Sports. Mike here. Today we launched the Summer Circuit 2018. That's right, we are back at it again this year. Gonna get a couple videos out during the summer, maybe some draft related, some just discussion related, whatever you want to call it. Starting today with a topic that kind of came to me the other day. We're going to be talking about quarterbacks that, in the draft process for the last couple years, at least as long as I've been covering, have developed a lot of negative attention, and not necessarily because of off-the-field stuff. No. What I mean by negative attention is hate. Just general fucking hate and despise from the draft community, the media, fans, whatever you want to call it. Because it has come from all different angles. So today we're looking at going back as far as I've been doing the draft seriously, and as long as I've been doing talent evaluation. Going to be looking at 7 of the most hated prospects at the quarterback position since 2014. Enjoy. Now, for all of these quarterbacks, I'm going to be breaking it down into very simple categories. So we're going to talk about how we got there, where they went in the draft, how they've gotten in the NFL since. Just 3 very basic topics, so let's get into it with the first one. Of course it had to be Bortles. Really, who else could it have been? 2014 was synonymous with 2 quarterbacks for very different reasons. You had Johnny Manziel and his off-field issues and his off-field antics, with the pro day involving former presidents being there, and all of the off-field shit and the immaturities that he had and were very clearly present that the NFL were scared off by. And Teddy Bridgewater, who the media seemed to find every possible way to tear the kid down for no reason. We're talking about a kid that was destroying NFL caliber defenses. Watch the bowl game he had against Florida that had, I believe, 9 or 10 NFL draft picks just on that defense. But he had skinny knees and he wore gloves. So, by the way, skinny knees has never come up for a quarterback since then and had never been mentioned beforehand. Makes me wonder what the fuck was going on there. But the NFL needed to find a new golden boy. And they weren't going to go with Derek Carr, because his brother was David Carr. So he couldn't be a number 1 pick, because his brother was a bust, because the Texans couldn't surround his brother with talent. So who did they find? Well, it couldn't be Garoppolo, because Garoppolo was a small school darling, and it wasn't until a couple years later that we were allowed to anoint FCS players as the best quarterback in the class. So they had to find Blake Bortles. Now, looking at Blake Bortles' numbers, they're not exactly terrible, but they're not exactly anything to write home about. He was actually quite accurate in college, which is kind of surprising. You know, he had back-to-back 3,000-yard seasons, had almost thrown for 3,600 yards in the 2013 season, only threw 9 picks, 25 touchdowns that year. Pretty good, but, I mean, he played in the American Conference. He was playing really bad defenses. What was there that was all... He was 6'5". He was 230 pounds. And at times, that's all it takes for the NFL to really get attached to a quarterback. It's just that simple. And you know what? No matter what Bridgewater did, he couldn't keep up with the overmounting pressure that Blake Bortles was going to be this new star. As we all know, the 2014 draft was very weird in terms of where these guys have turned out since. Manziel went 22nd to the Cleveland Browns and is now up here in Canada. Teddy Bridgewater went 32, played very well until he blew out his entire knee, and we'll never know if we'll see Teddy Bridgewater play down in the NFL again. But Blake Bortles, again, the shining star of the draft class, goes number 3 to Jacksonville. And he really he was a guy. He's been a guy this whole time. The Jags probably have been secretly wanting to replace him for a while. He's had several, quote-unquote breakout years where he threw for 35 touchdowns a couple years ago, but also led the league in interceptions. There's really nothing, there's nothing to this guy. And then Leonard Fournette comes in, saves his ass, gets them to the playoffs. And the Jags, if they're smart, are realizing that they've got one more year left with this guy. And if Bortles doesn't pan out this year, easily replaceable. There is nothing and I do mean nothing attractive about keeping Blake Bortles. So, was the hate warranted for this? I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say the hate was absolutely warranted. This was my first year covering the draft. I didn't exactly see a lot of Blake Bortles coming out because, again, I was still getting used to the ropes and learning everything I could about about who to scout, when to scout, yada yada yada. I had a second round grade on Blake Bortles. I didn't see much that would warrant a top 5 pick, and well, we've seen in the NFL there's been nothing that warrants a top 5 pick. He can get you to the playoffs as long as he's got one of the best running backs in the league behind him. So, was the hate warranted to the level that he got for being this random guy out of the blue? I'm going to say yes, because I honestly don't think at the time he deserved it, and he's definitely shown since that he didn't deserve it. 2015 was an interesting year for the quarterback class, to say the least. At the top, you had the two guys in Winston and Mariota. And after that, you had about absolutely fucking nothing. You had a bunch of just garbage quarterbacks, none of which were worth a fucking thing. And the only one that's really made an impact since, well, maybe there's two. Bryce Petty for all the wrong reasons, on the New York Jets, and Brandon Bridge, who went undrafted, but it's been pretty good up here in Canada playing for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. But so, I didn't want to pick someone like Sean Mannion, because why the fuck does Sean Mannion matter? He doesn't. So, had to go with the obvious one, Jameis Winston. I don't want to get into all of the issues that were present at Florida State for him. So what I'm going to do, if you don't know, it's in the description. There's a link. You can see the whole timeline to yourself. The crab legs, the rape allegations. There's more to it that I actually didn't know about going into this. So you can read all about it down below. I don't want to spend too much time getting into that because it's a lot of stuff that I don't really feel comfortable talking about. Off-field issues are always very touchy with me because there's a lot of, two different sides going at it. One is probably lying, and I never want to say who's lying and who isn't. So the whole time, we know that there are going to be two top quarterbacks taken, probably 1 and 2. You have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, fresh off of a garbage season that had Mike Glennon. Oh boy, Mike Glennon as their starting quarterback. And the Tennessee Titans, fresh off of a really bad season in their own right. Tampa decides they're going to keep it very, very hush-hush. Who's going to go number 1? We didn't hear anything the entire process, which, if it was Mariota, I'm going to say we probably would have heard at some point in the draft process from Jason Light, from the head coach, that it was going to be Mariota. But because of the off-field issues with Jameis, they kept it very hush-hush until the moment it was announced Jameis Winston went first overall. Now, how we got there was very interesting because we knew going into the season that Jameis was going to be a high draft pick. He had just had the Heisman Trophy win. And where we were going from there ultimately remained to be seen. Florida State was supposed to be such a powerhouse going forward the next year. And they were. They won a lot of games. But Jameis brought them back from the dead a lot, from big deficits, like we've seen quarterbacks have to do in the past. We saw Josh Rosen have to do it quite a bit this past year. The coming back from big deficits, but in large part due to turnovers that Jameis himself, was responsible for. They got down big in games because Jameis was turning the ball over. It happened against Oklahoma State. It happened in several games throughout the season. But they managed to always come back and win. In fact, I believe they went undefeated that season, but were on the edge for college football playoff, I believe, just because of how they were winning games, because they have to come back fourth quarter every single week. And fans ultimately got sick of it, especially in the draft community, because how you're rewarding someone for turning the ball over a lot because he manages to come up clutch, bailing himself out. So fans ultimately got sick of it because of the off-field issue, because of the on-field issues with the turnovers. So a lot of people really turned on Jameis and really joined Camp Mariota. I personally was still on Team Jameis, although, to be honest, they were like numbers 3 and 4 on my board. So it really didn't matter. But yes, Jameis goes number 1 overall, so where has it led them? Well, as we all know, the Tennessee Titans are the one that's come out a little bit ahead in this race. Jameis is still struggling with turnovers. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are not winning as many games as they probably should be with the talent around him. They've surrounded him with weapons, and the Bucs just have not been able to really get going. And it's a little disappointing. I don't want to say that Jameis is a bust or anything, because he still is a pretty decent quarterback. I just don't know if he's ever really going to be a franchise guy. He's going to be in that capable starter range. But Mariota has led a much weaker Tennessee team to the playoffs, and Jameis can't seem to buy a fucking break with the Bucs. Was the hate warranted? I'm going to say no. You know what? I've seen this over and over again, and you know what? I've been guilty of it myself with prospects in the past. You flame a kid coming out, Joe Mixon or Jameis Winston, very, very different issues, but both can be lumped in together. In terms of these kids were young, they made stupid mistakes. In Winston's case, I'm pretty sure that the charges were even dropped. And there wasn't, like with Mixon, a video of it. But you flame a kid for a mistake he made when he was 18, 19 years old. And, I mean, for a lot of us, we've all been 18, 19 years old. I'm 22. But I'm not in that type of pressure. I'm not, not everything I do is scrutinized from such a young age. Kids make mistakes, and I don't think that they should be punished for it. Has he exactly panned out in the NFL? No, he hasn't been great, and he's doing weird shit like eat a W, whatever the fuck that means, and that was one of the weirdest things I've ever fucking seen. I almost changed my mind just saying that. But being entirely serious, I think a lot of the hate came more so from his off-field, and the on-field was more of like a reason for those who didn't want to talk about the the off-field issues that were present with Jameis. Now, again, it's still up for grabs. I mean, Mariota has led his team to the playoffs, and Jameis is not. So Jameis has still a lot left to prove and a lot more room to go before he can truly silence those doubters, because Tampa should have been better last year, and they were pretty fucking dog shit. 2016, you guys are getting a 3-for-1 special here. We're going to break it into preseason and draft season. And let's start off with the preseason. It's none other than... Oh, who could forget Christian Hackenberg? Oh boy, the moment this kid stepped on campus in 2013 at Penn State, this was the golden boy. This was going to be the next Tom Brady. Oh my god, look at the poise he showed in his first game, destroying Syracuse. Then 3 years of nothing. Looking at his stats, his accuracy got worse every year he was in college. He went from 59% as a freshman to 56% to 53% in his final year. But going into his final year, this was still going to be the guy. This was clearly the guy. Everyone was labeling him a number 1 overall pick. Highest upside. So clean. Was like your prototypical quarterback. And then the wheels fell off. Now I'm going to say, when I did my evaluations for the 2016 draft during the summer like I do, and I am still doing now, I had Christian Hackenberg as like my QB4. I had him behind guys like Wentz, Goff, and I believe Cardale Jones. Cardale Jones could also fit in this list as well, but I'm not going to go there. Hackenberg, I watched like 7 games from his sophomore year and went, really, this is the guy? Like, he's doing fuck all against UMass and Akron, and you're going to tell me he's going to dominate the NFL? How'd we get there? Well, like I said, his freshman and sophomore years, we were, always going to take the next step. He's going to take the next step. And you know what the problem is? Sometimes in football, much as it is in life, sometimes people just peak in high school. I mean, we see this, and I don't mean that to be funny. I mean it legitimately. Like, think about some of the people that you went to high school with that were hot shit, and now that you're, my age, you're like 22, 23, or you're even older than that. You look back and you go, man, that guy was a shit in high school, and now he's the one flipping my burgers, and he's 28 fucking years old. it was kind of like that with Hackenberg, but in a less crude way. He just never really developed once he got to Penn State. He never developed, and people came up with all sorts of different excuses for him. That he had different coaches, he had different offensive coordinator, a different quarterback coach every year, was learning a new scheme every year. So his footwork, his arm work. I'm sorry, no top level quarterback can be one hopping bubble screens, and that was a fucking staple for Hackenberg. So what ended up happening with him when he at the next level? Well, by the time the NFL draft rolled around, Hackenberg was a fucking afterthought. And you know what? On Twitter, and I mean, I wasn't doing a full board back then. I wasn't part of draft Twitter or whatever the fuck they want to call themselves. I wasn't part of any of that. And I wasn't keeping a full spreadsheet of everything. But if I had to go back, I was estimating back then that Hackenberg would be like my QB 11 or 12. A lot of people were throwing around undrafted free agent grades. Like, he was a complete and total fucking afterthought. And then the Jets took him 51st overall and shocked everyone. And down below, I'm going to add in another clip. This is actually from the night that he was drafted. This is the instant reaction draft grades from Bleacher Report. And you'll see that Matt Miller was an optimist for this pick. He gave it a C because he used the same philosophy that I use. It was either going to work or it wasn't. Chris Sims was everyone else, at the time. He gave it an F minus. That's right, he gave it an F minus. I don't even know if that grade exists. But if you want, you can check that down below. It's actually a really funny video. I really do. I encourage you guys to check it. Two guys that, when it comes to draft grades and everything, I think very highly of. So he goes 51st overall and does nothing. In fact, he literally, to this day, has done nothing. The reason for this video is because of Christian Hackenberg getting traded to Oakland, a couple weeks back. And it just, him getting traded and the hate he received before and the hate he received, especially going to the New York media and playing for the Jets, a team that hasn't had a franchise quarterback since Namath. It all got me thinking that, like, there's something there. There's something beautiful there, that there's a video opportunity for this, because he literally, can you call a guy a bust when he hasn't thrown a pass? So that is the preseason. Let's go into I'm going to lump these next two guys together for the actual draft season for 2016. Yep, Wentz and Goff. Never before had I seen such a visceral reaction for or against players, that you couldn't actually like one or the other. And I fell victim to this myself. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I did it myself. I fucking was on one team very heavily and was on very against the other player. But I lumped them together because they did very much have the similar rise. Goff during the season became more of the guy as Hackenberg and Cardale Jones shit on themselves by being god awful at football and a third string quarterback at Ohio State. The media needed someone, and Goff was lighting up teams like USC, Stanford, Texas. He was actually playing really fucking well. And it wasn't until the Senior Bowl that Wentz came into the picture, because he dominated the Senior Bowl like no one had seen before. This small school kid came out of nowhere. Now, the reason that I have this is because these guys were pitted against each other by the media and by draft Twitter. And it's kind of funny because draft Twitter hated Carson Wentz, myself included, because I didn't see it. I mean, the media is talking about this guy that's 6'5", 235 pounds. I had already seen this fucking shit with Blake Bortles. And you're telling me this guy that's 6'5", 235 and missed 6 games with a broken hand is like built for the NFL, like Cam Newton. He's more durable than Jared Goff, who never missed a snap in 3 years, because Jared Goff is 6'3" and 210. And my own biases came into effect. I am a diehard California Golden Bears fan, so I didn't accept any hate of Jared Goff. And you know what? I probably could have looked at it objectively. And you know what? I was really stupid for thinking Paxton Lynch was a better quarterback than Carson Wentz. I am a Philadelphia Eagles fan. I should know better. But what I mean is, you had draft Twitter hyping up Jared Goff, you had the media hyping up Carson Wentz, and they're pitting themselves off against each other. You can't be a fan of both. They were like, oh well, like Wentz won two national titles at the FCS level, and Jared Goff never got to a bowl game. We're measuring QB wins in fucking college as a stat that matters, and all this bullshit, like you couldn't like one. If you liked Wentz, you're a son of a bitch because I like Goff. If you like Goff, you're a son of a bitch because I liked Wentz. And it was like this for 3-4 whole fucking months. And then the draft came along, and they went 1 and 2 for two teams that traded up a lot to go get them. And they had very similar rookie seasons. Wentz was labeled a disappointment because he wasn't getting Philly to the playoffs, and I mean, he didn't have a lot around him. They were rebuilding. They had just had to fire Chip Kelly, who was useless as a head coach. They had to bring in Doug Peterson, who was an unknown commodity. As for Jared Goff, he sat behind Case Keenum, who we now know is at least a capable starter. He showed it this past year out in Minnesota, but we didn't know that back then. And he sat for like 8 weeks before hitting the field. And let's not forget, he had Jeff Fisher as his head coach. How the fuck do you expect someone to do well and thrive in an NFL offense when Jeff Fisher is your head coach? Are you kidding me? My point being, they had very similar rookie seasons. And then, where are they now? Well, Jared Goff just led the Rams to the playoffs for the first time in over a decade. Carson Wentz laid the groundwork for the Philadelphia Eagles to win their first ever Super Bowl. Was the hate warranted? Nah. "2017, this is again another really easy choice. People on Twitter hated Mitch Trubisky because he wasn't Deshaun Watson. It's just that simple. I mean, Trubisky was good. He was pretty good, and you know what? The draft Twitter found every possible reason to explain away why he wasn't better than Watson. Watson had won a national title. Watson had done this. Watson had done that. What the fuck's Trubisky ever done? Well, Trubisky was a one-year guy. Came up in the middle of the season. If you ask Kyle Krabs, and believe me, you don't even have to ask Kyle Krabs, he'll be the first to tell you that he found him, and Mitch Trubisky himself. Pretty sure he mentions that every time he has the opportunity to, and will going forward till the end of time. But Trubisky was drafted number 2 overall by the Chicago Bears, who traded up from number 3. It was a really bad trade at the time. It's okay, San Francisco dropped the ball by getting Solomon Thomas with the next pick. But the question throughout the whole draft process was, how do you draft someone that couldn't beat out Marquise Williams at North Carolina? And that's one thing that draft Twitter never understood at the time, is that not every quarterback position is always open year to year. And sure, you look at an Alabama, you look at a Georgia, LSU. These are quarterback positions that are year to year always up for grabs. Jalen Hurts can lead a team to a national title game and then lose a starting job the next year because, Tua's there. Well, it didn't happen. Okay. Well, now he's lost it again because Tua. My point being that not every team is in the same spot where they need to be looking for a national title. And North Carolina was not exactly in that type of position before. Marquise Williams was a good college quarterback. He had led North Carolina to, I believe, an 11-2 season the year before. So it's not like Trubisky was going to be pushing that guy. Williams leaves, Trubisky comes in. North Carolina still does pretty well. The problem is that a lot of people on draft Twitter just could not wrap their heads around someone that was a one-year guy being better than a guy that just won a national title game. And you know what? Sometimes stats are misleading, and sometimes accolades are misleading too. That's why guys like Troy Smith, despite winning the Heisman, were 6th-round draft picks. Is that accolades and team awards doesn't always ultimately mean that they're the best player. Tebow. So Trubisky had a pretty decent season this year, but he had nothing around him. He kind of followed the Carson Wentz, description that I just used, that he had nothing around him. He also had the Jared Goff defensive, coach that doesn't give a flying fuck about the offense as the head coach. Now they've hired hotshot young coordinator, going to come in, hopefully fix the system, and actually surround the guy with weapons. So maybe Mitch Trubisky can actually turn things around, and the Bears can stop being dog shit. But was the hate warranted? I'm going to say absolutely not. People are giving up on this kid way too early. It's only been a fucking year. Bad pick. He was labeled as a bust from like the moment he was picked because he wasn't Deshaun Watson, and I think that that's pretty clear. Last but not least on our little journey of guys that are absolute heat magnets, Josh Allen, quarterback, Wyoming. Where did it all start? Let's go back to January of 2017. Matt Miller puts out a tweet saying that the NFL thinks that this kid from Wyoming, a redshirt sophomore by the name of Josh Allen, could be a top 5 pick. Who in the fuck is Josh Allen out of Wyoming? You watch the tape, and he's okay at best, but there's no way that this is an accurate statement. Josh Allen decides to return to Wyoming, and because of the media attention he got right before the declaration deadline, is considered a top guy for 2018. You saw my video. If you guys haven't seen my video from last year, the quarterback primer that I did in July of last year, I was never big on Josh Allen. I had him as like the 4th or 5th quarterback in the summer last year behind guys like, Rudolph, Mason Rudolph, Josh Rosen, Sam Darnold. I think even Matt Linehan from Idaho. Was never going to be big on Josh Allen. This was going to be his year to really prove me wrong. And he didn't. He showed exactly what everyone else already knew, that he wasn't going to be able to perform when the games actually mattered. Great. You beat up on Northwest Southern Missouri Tech State School for the Blind Tech. But how'd you do against Oregon? Yeah, you didn't do well. You threw more picks than touchdowns. You had a sub 50% completion percentage. You got destroyed. How'd you do against Iowa? Yeah, you get first game of the year, nothing. Just fuck all. Looked like absolute trash. Same thing against Oregon. He threw for like 93 yards against Hawaii. What even? Like, how am I going to take a guy seriously when he throws for 93 yards against Hawaii on like 9 of 19? It's fucking Hawaii. But the narrative kept going that this was good. I mean, we hear it all the time. That's why a lot of these guys are on this list. They got the traits. Doesn't matter that he doesn't have the skill, but he's got the traits. He's got a big arm. He's big. Played in cold weather. Let's get to the draft. Let's skip the rest of that season because it really didn't fucking matter. In a very boring, monotone 2018 draft where really the top quarterbacks going in were still being talked about in the exact same order coming out. The Buffalo Bills trade up, and in the most mystifying thing I've ever fucking seen, take a quarterback in Josh Allen that needs to sit for 2 years minimum to learn how to actually play in an NFL offense. But they don't have a quarterback on a roster that they can actually sit him behind. I went through this in my draft grade videos. I don't want to go through any more of this. But you draft a guy that needs to sit and you don't have anyone for him to sit behind. This isn't destined to do well, but I mean, jury's still out. He was literally only drafted 2 months ago. So, I don't want to say anything, but was the hate warranted for the draft process? I'm going to say absolutely. There is no way this kid should have been touched in the top 10. This was a second-round pick at best. I never bought onto the narrative that this is a Logan Thomas, who is a tight end, or that he was a UDFA type guy. He had the traits, but to me, I'm sorry, he needed to have a little bit more than traits for me to touch him in the first round. That's all I'm going to say. So thank you for sitting through my 7 quarterback heat magnet list, or whatever I'm going to end up titling this. What'd you guys think? Let me know down below. I like to do kind of these videos during the summer where, I'm not pressured to do about, mock drafts, quarterback rankings, anything like that, scouting reports. I was also thinking maybe I would do a video of like going back to 2014 up until this past year, like guys that draft Twitter loved or the media fucking loved or were hyped up that fell flat. Like your Vernon Adams, your Ryan Nassib, although he was before I got into it. But like, tell me what you guys want to see. This is definitely your time of year to have a lot more input into this channel than you would normally have. Because I love hearing from you guys as to what you want to see during the summer, what type of content you want to see. Let me know. As always, guys, like, comment, subscribe, tell a friend to tell another friend, and I'll see you again next time.